Hi, I'm just saying that I hope everything is well and you're enjoying it so far. Sometimes, as humans, we come up with ideas and projects without really taking into account what their impact will be. However, we should see beyond what is evident and try to understand and relate the world around us before we make a decision. Today, I am proud to introduce to you Manuel Pallares, who after years of working in the Andean region has become an authority on the social and environmental implications of oil production. From 1991 to 2005, Manuel acted as the connection between affected local communities in Ecuador and the team of lawyers that originally filed the Texaco lawsuit in 1992. He was one of the first people to introduce these communities into the use of GIS technology, which allowed them to understand the changes in their surroundings and improve their quality of life. Manuel also served as the director of the Environmental and Social Reparation Fund within Ecuador's Ministry of the Environment. From 2000 to 2005, he organized and managed the reunification and cultural revalorization project of the Sequoia people of Ecuador and Peru. Currently, Manuel leads Equitable Origins stakeholder engagement with indigenous communities and organizations throughout Latin America. He is a vivid example not only of awareness and responsibility with our environment, but also of the importance of using one's abilities to serve others. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Manuel Pallares.
Good afternoon. Really happy to be here. I'm a former student from this school. I graduated in 1987. And just to remember, this school was created during World War II, when the world was under the siege of fascism and authoritarianism around the world, and it was created on the vision of providing our society with a space for free thinking and the kind of things that were in danger at that time. And I believe this school has graduated many Ecuadorians that, from very different perspectives, have helped the country keep this notion of freedom of thought and the creation of a nation that is more inclusive. I'm going to speak about something very important that pertains to the lives, especially the people who live around here. I don't know if kids that live in Quito can raise their hands. Okay, many of you live here. And what about the kids that came from other countries who are staying at Hotel Quito? All of them. Okay, great. So you're going to understand a lot of things that I'm going to speak today. Okay, this is the Amazon forest. As I say, the Amazon forest is a forest like no other forest. I'm not saying that other forests are less than the Amazon. Every forest is beautiful. Every tree is beautiful. But the Amazon forest is unique. It's the largest forest in the world. It's the largest tropical forest in the world. And it's a home to the largest number of different species of plants, trees, birds, any group of living organisms that lives in this earth. Well, the Amazon is the home of most of them. And we are here. This is Quito. Right here. And as you see, the limit of the Amazon are the Andes. And the Andes and the Amazon are two, like, let's say, organisms that live together, that depend one on the other. As I don't know if you know about this, but you should know, the Earth turns from west to east. And that creates winds that go from east to west. Okay? So those winds bring humidity from the Atlantic over the Amazon and then to the Andes. It's thanks to these winds that life in the Andes, as we know it, is possible. You can see how lush and beautiful everything is around Quito these days because the winds are bringing the rain. A couple of weeks ago, Quito was very different. Quito was very dry and we had fires all over the place because most of this rain comes from the jungle. Okay, so here, this is Quito. These are the Andes, and as you can see, all of the clouds, if you look into the sky in Quito any day, any time, you will see that most of our clouds come from the east. And they fly over the Andes to reach Quito and make the Andes a very bountiful place. And this is along Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia. Millions of people live and depend on the moisture that comes from the jungle. Well, this is a satellite image of the Amazon, the Amazon jungle. And as you can see, this is a formation of clouds that come from the jungle itself. We don't have humidity coming directly from the Atlantic Ocean into Quito. Most of the rain that we receive here has been recycled over the Amazon jungle many times before it reaches the Andes and it can fall into Quito. Also, the Amazon is a very interesting forest because it's the only forest that grows during the dry season. For many years, NASA has been taking images of the Amazon, and scientists have been thinking that the satellites had something wrong. There was something wrong with the cameras and the sensors in these satellites. Because they showed, the pictures over 20 years showed that the trees in the Amazon were greener during the dry season. The dry season are several months where the trade winds, the winds that I showed you that are created because of how the earth revolves from west to east. Those winds carry the moisture from the Atlantic to the Amazon. But there are some months in the year where these winds stop. And this is a time where the forest flourishes, where it grows. It has more leaves and more flowers, and when the forest gives fruit and disperses all the seeds. Okay? So that was the time started that the satellites were wrong. But finally, because NASA had not just satellites, but also stations on the ground, they discovered that the forest was absorbing more CO2 from the atmosphere during the dry season. So the satellite was right. That the forest was growing faster during the dry season. And the amazing thing is that the forest, after it has grown, after it has given seeds and has dispersed different species of plants, then the forest itself starts creating clouds. And the creation of these clouds creates thunderstorms in the upper atmosphere, and that restarts the trade winds. And then the forest, after it's finished with its reproduction and growth, it by itself creates the new winds that bring water. So a few weeks ago, when Quito was dry and we had all of these fires in every forest, some of the fires were shown in the very video. It's because we were waiting for the jungle to make the rain come back. And that's why the Amazon forest is unique. And that's why we depend on the Amazon forest. Some other unique feature about the Amazon forest is biodiversity. And as you see these maps, the areas in red are the areas with the highest biodiversity of different groups of living organisms, amphibians, mammals, birds, plants. And all of them show this area to be the richest of all. Okay, so this is the area in this planet where you find the largest number of birds, plants, amphibians, reptiles, any group of living things. This is the area where the Amazon of Ecuador is found, where the National Park and the Keynote National Park are found. As an example, in Yasuni, in this park, Ecuador is a small country, and the national park is only 1 million hectares, which is 2 million acres. But within the limits of the park, we have 150 amphibians. That is more than all the symptoms you find in the US and Canada together. You know, we have 120 species of reptiles. Again, it's greater than the number of reptiles in North America. You see 382 species of fish just in the park. And that's more than the species of fish you can find in the entire Mississippi Basin, which is a huge basin, one of the largest basins in the world. And you find more than 100,000 species of insects per hectare. A hectare is roughly 2 football courses. So can you imagine that 100,000 different species of insects can live together in the area of 2 football courses? This, all of these wonders that the jungle has, well, the jungle also has other resources that have been very important for humans and that have put the jungle in danger. In 1967, oil was found in Ecuador. Texaco is the first company that found commercial quantities of oil in the jungle, and it started the exploitation of oil. As you see, this picture was taken in the 70s. The forest is here. This is the place where an oil well was drilled, and this is the places, what we call the pits, where the first oil that was discovered was thrown into this pit. At that time, when a new well was discovered, they didn't have pipelines to connect to the wells. So all that oil that came from that well, they called it's kind of a trial, where they tried the well to see how much oil it has, what's the quality of the oil, what's the pressure of the oil. All of that oil was discharged into open pits. Hundreds and thousands of those pits were left in the Amazon of Ecuador without any treatment. Many years afterwards, in the 90s, they tried to cover, basically to hide those pits. This is a picture of that time. You see what they were trying to do. And then years afterwards, you can see oil coming out of this pit that were covered just by dirt. And again, I tell you, thousands of these pits were left in Ecuador without any treatment. A very important aspect of this problem is that people moved into the jungle. Ecuador had many political different issues at that time that moved a lot of people into the jungle and next to those wells. So there's a big connection between humans who moved into that area and end up living next to the wells. And as you see, first of all, a lot of covers. The areas around the oil that was discovered in Ecuador are very poor. Just very poor people that were very poor moved into that area. And also that means that the contact of the people with pollution is very high. As you see, a lot of kids walk without shoes. And that's why David brought shoes to the kids, because he saw that this was one of the problems that kids had. It was a simple solution bringing shoes to kids. Because a lot of the pollution could go into your feet and into your body. And the Amazon and the area where oil has been exploited in Ecuador has very high rates of cancer. Because many substances that are found in oil, especially the light molecules of oil, are very carcinogenic. Right? And this is a kind of livelihood that was developed in that area. Every pipe here represents an oil well, and they all get together into big stations where oil is processed, and then it goes into larger pipes, into pipeline that can go over the Andes to the coast, and that's how Ecuador exports oil from the jungle. But can you imagine going to school and having to cross all of these pipes every day before you have to go to school, back from school? Some of these pipes are really, really hot. And this is how thousands of people live, because of how oil was developed in Ecuador, because of the decisions that were made and the technology that was used at that time. But this is something that is a present reality. Those pits are still there, these pipes are still there. Kids that go to school tomorrow will have to jump over these pipes tomorrow and the day after. Another important aspect of this catastrophe is the burning of gas. Oil doesn't come along in nature. And in central stations, where oil is first processed, water, gas, and oil are separated. Oil is used as an export thing. Water is, right now they don't do that, but for many years, that water was directly discharged into the environment. And that water was very polluted. And then gas was burned day and night for many, many years in these very primitive burners. I know kids go to school, you almost all know a Benson burner that you have in your lab, and how you can calibrate your burners so they have a good combustion in different colors, and you have the only thing that is left is CO2. But in this case, this is an incomplete combustion. An incomplete combustion creates a lot of dioxins, and dioxins are very, very harmful for health. So a lot of people that have the rivers polluted and wells polluted because of underground pollution, they depend on rainwater, and a lot of that rainwater again was polluted because of the smoke created by these fires. Another important aspect of the discovery of oil in Ecuador is related to the number of people living in the area. I don't know if you can see this clear, but these two lines, the yellow line here represents a projection of the population in the Amazon of Ecuador from 1950 to 2001. That's what was expected in terms of our population growth. And this was the real population growth of Ecuador, as a nation. If you look into these other graphs here, this was a projection in the jungle, in the province of Sucumbíos, and this was the real growth of population. If you were in 1962, people had this projection before oil was discovered, but here oil was discovered, and you can see, how the population growth, the rate of that growth was much higher than the expected growth. To see these images, these two images, these are two photographs taken by an airplane of the same spot. In this case, this is Shushufindi, it's one of our main oil towns. Shushufindi is home of the largest reservoir ever found in Ecuador, the Shushufindi Reservoir, from where almost 2 billion barrels of oil have already been exploited. As most kids that are Ecuadorian know, our president has decided to exploit the Yasuni, the IDT reservoir, and there is around 1 billion barrels of oil in IDT. In Shushufindi, there are almost 2 billion barrels have already been exploited out of Shushufindi. But if you see this picture from 1976, here you can see the houses. There were 16 houses here. And in 1985, just 9 years afterwards, there was an entire town. So that is one of the big effects of oil exploitation in Ecuador, is that it brought a lot of people to live into the area, a lot of farmers, and that created huge deforestation. And as I explained before, our rain, our water, depends on this forest. If this forest goes, the entire stability of the Andes is in jeopardy. Something else that is interesting is that even though most of the wealth of Ecuador is an oil exporting nation, and a lot of our wealth comes from oil, and still the area where oil is exploited has the lowest access to potable water. Even though pollution is so important, even though a lot of people don't have access to good water, because the rivers are polluted, because underground water is polluted, and sometimes rainwater is polluted, still there's no access to potable water. Because traditionally, even though our wealth comes from this area is the one that has received the least social economic improvements. Well, the same with poverty. The national mean poverty in 2005 was 38%. Quito has 18% and Guayaquil 23%. And the area where oil is found ranges from 52 to 95. So even though has also created a lot of social problems and a lot of uprisings. There were many protests. Most of the kids in the school, they're too young to remember because we haven't had this kind of things in the last years. Because right now we have high prices of oil and a lot of money is being taken to the jungle, to that area. But in the past, the area where oil is exploited had a lot of social issues and also a lot of resistance to the exploitation of oil. That's why in Ecuador, the gasoline thing, the IDP project have become such a very important issue because people that have lived the development of oil in the past don't want more oil to be developed. Well, not everything is that bad. Engineers, companies, businesses, people realize their mistakes. New oil projects in Ecuador are developed in a different way. For example, this is a case of a project that was developed by Occidental Petroleum in the 90s. And you can see an oil project that is in the middle of the jungle, but they don't allow settlers to come into the jungle. So there is no deforestation. The only deforestation is the one that is used to drill the wells or the installations. And really, it's not that much. Here, this entire oil project occupies 60 hectares, that's 120 acres, and produces over 60,000 barrels of oil every day. So there's a lot of money coming from a little area, and very little damage has been created there. That's what the government of Ecuador is saying about this new project, the IDP project, which is true. With technology, right now, oil can be exploited out of the jungle with little damage to nature. But that is just one aspect of this equation. There are many other aspects that have to be taken into account, especially the social aspects of that. The development of oil doesn't just create pollution, it creates a lot of other problems that I'm going to talk afterwards. But that's just one of the problems. Now oil projects basically rely on what is called directional drilling. That means that from one well site, many wells can be drilled. That's how they don't need to use as much space as before. When Texaco came here in the 70s and 60s, every well had to have a well pad by itself. And every well pad usually uses the area of roughly four football fields. But now from one well pad up to 15 or up to 20 wells can be drilled. And that's a big improvement over time. Also, at present time, many of the pipelines that are developed to bring oil out of the ground have been developed taking helicopters or other technology as not to build roads. So many of the new pipelines don't need roads, and that's a great thing because without roads, settlers cannot come into the jungle and deforestation doesn't happen. So this is the kind of things that are being done now, not just in Ecuador, but in Colombia and Peru. But a lot of these things that you see, a lot of these improvements that you see now, are only a consequence of social uprisings, where people have stand up against terrible oil practices. It's not just because companies realized things were bad, because companies were sued, because companies were opposed, because people mobilized against the things that you saw before. That's what brought a lot of these improvements into Ecuador. And those improvements arrived into South America very late. I don't know if you know about the Alaska pipeline. In the US, for example, there's a great example of very responsible practices in the development of a pipeline, like the one that happened in Alaska. That was in 1973. But companies that knew the technology, that knew how to do things like that, like the project in Alaska, like the Alaska pipeline, operated in our countries in terrible ways. And it was not up to 1992, 1995 that companies started to put these good practices to work on these good practices. And it was basically because they were sued. And that's why this case against Mexico was so important. Because that made companies be aware that they could be sued in their headquarters anytime. after that, they changed the practices in a radical way. Well, but the jungle is not just under threat of oil. As I explained to you, oil is done in a much better way now. So oil doesn't take a lot of forest to develop, but the forest is being used for other purposes. And one of the big purposes is the soy and African hop. The Amazon, every day, hundreds and thousands of hectares of forest are destroyed for the use of that land to plant soy and African palm. Two things that are used mainly as food, as oil, as vegetable oil for we use in our kitchens, but also as a source of energy, because that oil, that vegetable oil is also used as biodiesel. So because of that, prices of oil are so high at this time in the world, that creates an attraction, that creates a market for more forest to be cut down to produce oil from the ground, or from agriculture, as a source of energy, which is the worst way of using our soil. And the other big threat is mining. Usually, oil is found in some kind of soil that are deposits of sediments, what they call sedimentary basins, where a lot of mud and animals and dead animals and dead plants have been, they were put together through sedimentation. Usually you don't find mines and oil in the same place, but a lot of the Amazon also has the ancient rocks of the planet, where you find gold, precious metals, precious stones. So there are also big projects for the development for big mining developments in the jungle. And many of them, in these cases, are open mines. They take a huge amount of forest to develop. And also because underground, when we go underground to the rocks that form the earth, there are many heavy metals. You can find copper and other heavy metals that when these mines are developed, they leach into the environment and create a lot of pollution as well. And this is the other big threat to the jungle. You can see here a river, a small river, and here what you see is a dam. This is another side of the image. So here they stop the river to create a huge dam and generate electricity. So all the trees and plants and animals that were living here were drowned for many feet of water. There are cases, especially in Brazil, and especially dams, big dams that were developed in the 80s, where people think that even uncontact tribes were drowned in those dams. Because indigenous people living in this area without notice of what was happening were drowned under water that was used to develop these dams. So this is another of the big threats the Amazon has. And for me, one of the big issues are indigenous people. The Amazon is a huge area of forest that is also the home of many, many indigenous tribes that arrived into the Amazon 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. There are as much languages and cultures in the Amazon as birds and plants. The Amazon is also the most culturally diverse area in the world. Just think about that Ecuador. Only Ecuador has, in the Amazon of Ecuador, there are 11 different tribes, speaking basically 11 different languages, and those languages belong to 5 different linguistic families. As an example, Chinese and German come from the same linguistic family. So you can imagine that in Ecuador we have more linguistic families than in all the span of time that you find between China and Europe. So it's not just the diversity of living things, there's also the diversity of culture that is present in the Amazon, and it's also under threat of these big changes. And as I explained, our rain comes from the forest, and also that means that the means by which we sustain ourselves, we feed ourselves, the crops of the Andes depend on the rains that come from the jungle. Also, it's very important to recognize that this system, the system that is created between the Andes and the jungle, the Amazon, is responsible for the development of many of the different crops we have around the world and that feed a large number of people all over the world. For example, potatoes. Potatoes were developed in the Andes. Some varieties of corn, or yucca, for example, which is one of the main foods for Africa. They all came from this area. The Andes, the region between the Andes and the Amazon, the tropical Andes as they call it, is the region that has originated the largest number of crops to sustain humanity in the world. Because this is one of the wonders of this relationship between the Andes and the Amazon. And so many people live here. This is a picture of Lima. Lima is next to the ocean, next to the Pacific Ocean, far away from the jungle, far away from the Amazon. But every drop of water that gets into Lima, potable water that gets into Lima, doesn't come from the ocean that's next to Lima. It comes from the rains in the Andes that are possible below the Amazon, and the different valleys that Peru has that are under the showers of these rains from the Amazon bring water down to the west and make it possible for big cities like Lima to exist. Lima has over 10 million people. The same, the potable water that we have in Quito, in Republic, or in every main city of the Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, is dependent on the health of the ecosystem that we call the Amazon jungle. And well, there are many challenges now. This is basically a graph of the energy demand for the world up to 2050. And as you see, we need more and more and more energy. A lot of the developing world is developing, and it's coming out of poverty, and more people have access to buy cars, computers, cell phones, refrigerators, whatever. Everything, every appliance that we use uses energy. So we need more and more and more energy. And where is this energy going to come from? Well, this is just the case for the US, but as you see, renewables that are something that we all think are going to save our lives and save the future are very little in comparison to other sources. So oil and other liquids are here. You see, most of our energy comes from oil, coal, nuclear energy, and natural gas. So basically, natural gas, coal, and oil, they all come from the same source. They come from ancient energy that was captured by our planet and it's being stored as hydrocarbons. When you think about gasoline, what you're using basically solar energy from millions of years ago that was stored in the organic material of plants and animals that turned into oil and gas at present. That is energy from ancient salt, from ancient sun. And we still depend a lot on these things. And this is 2040. So you see, a lot of the energy that is going to sustain humans, the human use of energy, still comes from those sources. Okay? And this is the latest map on hydrocarbon resources around the world. Basically what they call shale. Shale is a new frontier in hydrocarbons. Shale is a rock that contains, let's say, not so concentrated amounts of hydrocarbons, but because shale occupies large expanse of area, huge areas, there's a lot of hydrocarbons in shale. And basically, shale is what is bringing most of the hydrocarbon production to the US right now, in this area. But the Amazon is also a place where a lot of hydrocarbons are found. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to extract those hydrocarbons? How are we going to have access to that energy that comes from the jungle without destroying the jungle and without destroying or changing the way of life in the jungle in such a way that the people that are living in the jungle will turn the jungle into plantations, will destroy the jungle, and that put our entire livelihood in the Andes in jeopardy. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And when you see, when you go to Guadalquivir, you can see across the valley that is in front of you, you see the mountains. Behind those mountains, we have the Amazon. And that's what allows us to have the good life that we have here, and the beauty that we have here.